I've worded this question very carefully, and I'm going to read it twice, not because I question anybody's intelligence, but just to make sure I get the point across. The question is, if God knows that by creating you, you will end up in hell, how has God not determined that you end up in hell by creating you? Okay, say it one more time. If God knows that by creating you, you will end up in hell, and nothing can change what he knows, how has God not determined that you end up in hell by creating you? Now, the most common way that this particular question is usually addressed from the free will side is that they will say, well, just because God knows that something will happen does not mean that he determined it to happen, right? Just because God foreknows that something will happen does not mean that he determined that it will happen. And this, again, sounds great on the fly, but when you stop for even half a second, you realize that this is why I worded the question that I asked so carefully. Because you'll notice something. If God knows that by creating you, his knowledge is grounded in his own action, right? So the only way that the statement that if God foreknows something doesn't mean he determined it would be true is if the thing he's foreknowing is not traceable to him. In other words, he has nothing to do with, absolutely nothing to do with whatever it is he's foreknowing. And the reason that this ridiculous idea would even enter people's minds to begin with is because we always try to draw humanistic analogies and make things relatable to us. And unfortunately, this can result in a lot of false analogies. So people will say things like, well, I can foreknow things, right? Let's pretend I foreknow that tomorrow on the other side of the planet, X, Y, and Z are going to happen. But I had nothing to do with those things. So see, I proved my point. I can foreknow X, Y, and Z, even though I had nothing to do with them. The problem with that is, the reason you have nothing to do with X, Y, and Z is because you didn't create X, Y, and Z. You're not upholding X, Y, and Z by your power, so on and so forth. There's all the difference in the world between you and what is happening around you, and God and what is happening in the universe he created, right? So God has absolutely everything to do with everything because he's the creator of it all, at a bare minimum. That's a bare minimum. We're just talking about God bringing stuff into existence, right? Or in the case of my question, we're just talking about God bringing you into existence, right? So already, we would have to change that humanistic analogy from I foreknow on the other side of the planet X, Y, and Z to I foreknow that if I do something X, Y, and Z. Now the analogy is more accurate, right? Because we are grounding our foreknowledge in our own action. And this is what makes all the difference in the world. This is what invalidates the statement. Just because God foreknows something doesn't mean he caused it, right? God's foreknowledge is grounded in his own actions. God knows if I create this universe, X, Y, and Z will happen. Therefore, by taking that action, he is ensuring that X, Y, and Z will come about. By taking the action, you ensure that what you foreknow will result from that action will come about. It's perfectly logically valid. And the idea that you're foreknowing things that you have nothing to do with, trying to apply that to God, is invalid. So if I just give a quick example, you could give a billion examples if you had the magical thing called foreknowledge. You could say, well, if I foreknow that by letting my friend use my car, he's going to get in an accident and die, then by taking that action and letting my friend use my car, I am determining that he dies. Period. There's no way around that, right? And I'm not raising any sort of moral question or whatever, obviously. I'm just making the simple point that you are determining what you foreknow will come to pass by taking the action upon which that foreknowledge is grounded. So going back to the question, if God foreknows that by creating you, you will end up in hell, right? His own action comes logically first in the order of what he is foreknowing. God can't foreknow anything about you unless he first foreknows that he's going to make you, right? Logically speaking, you want to sit there and just talk about this basic idea that God foreknows what you're going to do. Before he can foreknow what you're going to do, he has to foreknow that you're going to exist. And who is it that's responsible for your existence? It's God. It's not you. You didn't bring yourself into existence, right? That would be absurd. And yet that's the only way in which your ridiculous statement, God foreknowing the future doesn't mean he determined it, would be true. Is if you brought yourself into existence, you popped yourself into existence, and now God foreknows you're going to end up in hell. Now your statement's true. Now you have an argument. But this is not reality. Reality is God brought you into existence, and everything he foreknew about your future was first grounded in and is the result of his action to bring you into existence. The point is very basic. I'm just trying to cover it from different angles so people can see it. I'm not trying to be dramatic. That answer is one of the worst answers in all my theological studies I've ever come across. Just because God foreknows something doesn't mean he determined it. Absolutely ridiculous. And this is unavoidable not just from the creation of you or the creation of the universe. It's unavoidable from all angles when it comes to God. Because whether it's God creating the universe, whether it's God creating you, whether it's God taking action in time and interacting with people, God foreknows the results of his own actions every step of the way. And therefore, by taking those actions, he is determining the future of those actions. Period. Okay? And I challenge anybody to refute what I'm saying without appealing to mystery.